How good is Missouri, and what are the expectations long-term for the Tigers?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal. I am Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. 59, Super Bowl 59 is here. It's hard to believe, but it's coming up, and there's no better way to make every day more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show is going to be fun because we're going to be talking about the SEC, the Missouri Tigers, their rise, and everything to do it. And to make that happen, we've got a really good opportunity today because I got my buddy John Miller. Thank you for coming on the show, man. You're the host of Locked On Missouri. You're as big a Missouri fan as anybody I've ever met. And I got family that worked at the school. So I'm pretty sure that fans are going to be excited for this. Thank you once again, John. How's everything going, man?
Oh, Scoutmaster, great to be here. Great to see you as always. Excited for your new show here, The Portal. What a brilliant name, first of all. So, yeah, let's get into it, man.
Absolutely. This show is everything about roster management. Portal, NIL, recruiting, you name it. That's what this show is, and I love it. So let's dig in here. A few questions right off the bat about the 25 kids. 17 players for the Tigers were signed, and among them, I know some of them, and I'm sure you've dug into this a million different ways on your show. Donovan Olubade from IMG, the receiver, I expect him to play early. Really good route runner. You got Zollers, who a kid I'm sure everybody's excited about, but quarterbacks don't normally play early. They beat out Penn State for him out of PA. That was huge win for Missouri. You got Javion Hilson, Jack Lange, the incredible offensive tackle, maybe the best OT in the country. Sean Terry, you got Folks, the two receivers, the quick guys. You got Manfred, a kid I know out of Atlanta that's really good. What are your takes on the recruiting class and kind of overall what Missouri has done out of the high school ranks?
Well, as you talked a lot about that 2025 recruiting class, and I really like all those names you listed off, quite honestly. And to start it off with Zollers, the quarterback, anytime you can just start off your class that way, it seems like sometimes the momentum can roll downhill for you in a good way. And the thing is, that's a 17-man class. A lot of the teams surrounding Missouri in the recruiting rankings have 25, 26 guys. What I think that tells you is Missouri's getting more selective with its high school recruiting right now. A lot of those maybe 3-star type, developmental type guys, maybe that Missouri would have taken in the past, are kind of going by the wayside a little bit. And I think now Missouri, who's a real big player in the transfer portal the past 2 or 3 cycles, I think is going to continue to be so. I think that's what they're setting themselves up for. They want to have plenty of room. Speaking of roster management, that's exactly what they're doing. I think they're managing their roster very smartly. I like the high school guys that they're getting, but they're doing an excellent job of supplementing in the portal too.
Your point right there is something I had a conversation with one of my buddies about. I don't care what school you want to insert into the conversation, but just because you have NIL, and I'm sure most Missouri fans know this, Missouri's NIL is elite. That's not in question. It's tremendous. Just because you have money doesn't mean you should spend it. It's just like in life.
Right.
Are you getting what you paid for? So if you're not going to get the kid that's worth X, fill in the blank, let's save the money. Let's use it on coaches. Let's use it on facilities. Let's use it on the portal. They have managed it really well in combination. That is so important, John, because I'm not going to go into specifics on teams. I'm going to throw a bunch of people under the bus.
Right.
But I see a few teams that are like, okay, at the end of the cycle, they didn't get their guy. They didn't get, like, I'll talk about Damon Wilson here in a little bit, a kid I'm very high on that they got out of the portal from Georgia. They didn't get the Damon Wilson. So they spent similar money on another kid. And I'm like, are you serious?
Right.
It's stupid. And then you go into the
season.
It. Yeah. It's like, why would you do that? You're not going, it's like spending new car money for a used car. You got to make some sense of it. Hats off to Missouri. And after a 10-win season with the Bowl, what are your expectations for Missouri this next season? And then I'll cut into a recruiting question off of that.
Yeah, I think for 2025, you're looking at a new quarterback, Beau Pribula. Speaking of Penn State, well, he was the Penn State backup who famously
That's right.
entered the portal before they actually started the college football playoff. So there was some controversy there. The good news from a Missouri perspective, hey, James Franklin backed and was like, hey, great kid, no hard feelings, that type of deal. But the point here is that not only are you losing your quarterback, you're losing a couple first-round draft picks, probably most notably Luther Burden III, to all of the portal listeners out there. I think normally you would think, hey, this is a rebuilding kind of season for Missouri. Maybe the expectations go down a little bit. In the portal era, though, especially when Missouri has the NIL infrastructure that it has, I don't know that Missouri looks at it that way anymore. I think they're trying to compete for a spot in the playoff every year. I think that's their attitude now. I mean, as we're sitting here today, I don't know that we have enough experience at quarterback for me to predict that. I just know that I do like the talent there, and I just know that Missouri's going for it. As a Missouri fan, I can't really ask much more than that.
Well, that was my next point. Like, they're not jacking around
Right.
with the money, with the NIL. They're going after good players. And Pribula, like, he hasn't played a ton. Obviously, Penn State has a talented quarterback ahead of him, but this kid fits what they want to do. He's a little more mobile. And I think he's a guy that will create some problems. And here's the other advantage, just from a 25 perspective, and this will help them in recruiting. If they're able to win 9 or 10 games again this next season, like if they're in the conversation, John, for a plan to, we're going to at least get in the back door. We're not going to make the SEC title game, but maybe we're the third team or whatever. If they're in that conversation going in late into the season, like middle of November, that's going to help your recruiting. That's going to help your portal, everything. Your roster is going to continue to get better every year. But here's the other thing. You mentioned quarterback. Well, let's think about it. And I'm not picking on because he's a great kid. The young man at Georgia, is he a great player? No. Alabama, who's the quarterback? When those two teams have elite quarterbacks, the rest of the league's in a lot of trouble.
No kidding.
It's just true.
Right.
Florida's got a pretty good quarterback in Lagway, but I'm not a big Billy Napier guy. LSU's got a returning quarterback, but they got a lot of problems on defense.
Right.
Those are the 4 programs historically in the SEC. You're like, okay, if these guys haven't figured out, it's probably going to be hard because they get more talent than anybody. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody like Missouri, maybe Tennessee, they got Nico. He'll be in 3rd year. That's the other team that can sometimes kind of jump up. And then you got Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. I still need to see South Carolina's depth be enough to do better than 9-3 in the regular season. But why not Missouri? If Pribula is good this year, let's say he can throw for 2,800, rush for 8 touchdowns. I think he'll rush for quite a few with the RPO game that they run. Why can't they win 10 games? Why couldn't they?
Well, especially with the same schedule. I mean, there was so much talk about Missouri's schedule last year leading into the season. It's the exact same schedule, just flip the home and the away. So all of the advantages I think Missouri had last year are still there. I think it just comes down to, can the Tigers go 10-2? If they do, in the SEC, I don't care if it's an easy SEC schedule. Relatively speaking, it's still a strong schedule nationally. So all of that talk was kind of for naught. At the end of the season, if Missouri had beaten South Carolina, they would have been right there. So again, I just think, I don't see why Missouri, if they're good at quarterback, I think you're returning most of the pieces of a pretty good defense last year. You got a corner in the portal that you like in Stephen Hall. I think if Missouri can just shore up the outside defensively in the secondary, I think you got a really good defense and some nice pieces offensively too. A somewhat inexperienced offense, but a lot of talent. So they could definitely be there. It's possible. Again, not predicting it mostly because of Pribula's inexperience or Sam Horn if it ends up being him, or the true freshman Matt Zollers. That seems unlikely, but again, to your point, there really is no reason.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk about the player they got out of the portal that I love, and I know that Mr. John Miller has talked quite a bit about. He's a former Georgia Bulldog. That is next here on The Portal. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes has been about waiting, wandering, and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Then waiting, wandering, and worrying some more. Now taxes are about matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find your every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed, no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is how you do taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, John, my favorite player that they added, and I'm biased, I'll go into this, is actually from the portal. It's defensive end / outside linebacker, depending on your scheme. Damon Wilson. The Dogs run a 3-4 defense, traditional, kind of like a lot of NFL teams do, because they can actually get those nose guards. Damon Wilson was an animal, had over 300 snaps last year, a key player from Georgia, but he went into the portal and he ended up at Missouri. Now, Missouri's had some pretty good defensive ends over the last 10, 15 years.
For sure.
Sporadically, they've had some guys. Do you think they've had a guy that, even coming out of high school, I knew him when he played at Venice High School in Florida. He was benching 420 in high school as a defensive end. That's ridiculous. Have they had somebody with his physical traits, like he's 6'4", 6'5", 240 something, like he's 4'6", 4'7" guy? Have they had a guy on his level just physically, in your opinion?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I'd have to go either really recently. I mean, Williams Winery, quite honestly, has a heck of a physical profile. He had one season at Missouri, and now he's, speaking of the portal, well, guess what? He's at Nebraska now. But if you wanted me to go way back, especially a couple Smiths, I'd say Alden Smith, 2010, that range. Also Justin Smith, who is kind of a borderline NFL Hall of Famer as well. I mean, so we're talking some, Alden Smith, a guy famously who was a really hugely productive player in the NFL, but, well, his personal life got in the way, let's put it that way. So, I mean, we're talking two really highly skilled and highly talented guys there. So if Damon Wilson, who you've had a lot better look at than I have, if he's anything close to that, wow, I just got really excited about our front four next season.
Well, here's the other thing, and I talked about this yesterday on the portal. I did a show regarding quarterback recruiting for top 26 kids. The top 5 guys that like Rivals.com has, I've met all of them, been around them. They're all guys you want to be around off the field. You need that at quarterback, especially. That's a different deal.
Yeah.
But a lot of defensive linemen, they're not the guy you want your daughter to date. Okay, let's just cut to the chase here. Damon Wilson, when he was at Venice High School, was the kid that included everybody on the team and everything. And Venice is a big-time program. They're always in the state championship running. So he was the superstar at the school, blah, blah, blah. And he still included all those kinds of people. When you put pieces under your depth chart like a Damon Wilson physically, you're like, okay, that's great. But I'm telling folks now, he's the kind of guy that fans, if you're going to get an autograph, go get Damon's. He's the kind of person you want to be around. And I guarantee you that everybody on Missouri staff are going to be happy about him being there with the Tigers. So besides him, who else are some of the other guys that you think will be instant impacts out of the portal, if anybody?
Well, I think, first of all, you'd look at the skill positions. Other than quarterback, I think Ahmad Hardy, the running back, Louisiana Monroe, I think was a really explosive player last season. I've just been impressed by what I've seen from him and just can't wait to see what he can do at the SEC level. I really think it's going to translate. Also, Kevin Coleman, a guy who's shown already he can be an all-SEC, at least third-team type of performer. And Mississippi State, a team that was maybe the worst team in the league last year, if memory serves. But, yeah, they were pretty bad. So him coming to, I don't know, a little bit better of a situation, him coming back home, sort of. He's from St. Louis. So I think that could be a great fit, obviously. And he's basically taking over Luther Burden's slot position there. So obviously a position of need for Missouri. I'd probably lead with those two guys. But a lot of great players, a lot of really good potential added on defense, like you said, too. And kind of back to your point about Damon Wilson and his off-the-field stuff, I think that's one thing that's been impressive with Missouri, too. They've added a lot of different portal guys every year, and that can often take away from your culture. You're bringing in new people. Maybe they're not here for very long, but Missouri seems to have a great locker room. So, hey, if Damon Wilson sounds like he's going to be a big addition to that, too, that's great news.
Yeah, the locker room thing, it's something I bring up. I also do Locked On Seminoles, and let's just call it what it is. They made horrific mistakes based on the portal this past year. They took kids from Bama, Georgia, et cetera, that those schools didn't necessarily care if they left, but they
Right.
are highly rated kids
Mhm.
that hadn't produced yet. Only like one of them did anything, and there were some questions about what was going on in the locker room, who was getting NIL money, et cetera. Florida State had one of the most tanked seasons in the history of college football. So I'm really sensitive, I admit it, to what goes on with portal money, kids out of high school getting money, like guaranteed and stuff. So getting a guy like Damon Wilson is important. I also want to go back to something that you said. I think this is part of the reason he did it. But Kevin Coleman, Mississippi State, I won't name the person, but a Mississippi State fan that's in media mentioned that it was one of the worst SEC teams he could remember. And he's a fan. That's not a good sign, by the way.
Right.
Kevin had a really good year. He's a kid that was a national recruit out of high school.
Yep.
He ends up coming back home. Do you think they're going to have enough weapons outside? I mean, adding him's obviously great, where if they're in a shootout in a game, they can just, I assume Pribula is going to be pretty good. But do you think they can win with their skill talent against some of the upper echelon Southeastern Conference programs?
Well, I think that remains to be seen, but I actually do like Missouri's talent on the outside at receiver, too. To me, it's really about Josh Manning, I think, from Lee Summit, Missouri. He was a true sophomore last season, had his moments, but still kind of needs to take a real big step forward, I think, as a junior if the Tigers are going to hit their ceiling. The other outside receiver, Marquise Speedy Johnson, maybe he didn't have the breakout season that I was expecting this past year either, but I think some of that is circumstance with him, maybe some injury stuff, and also just, well, Missouri's pass protection at times wasn't up to snuff to maybe get those deep shots out, that kind of thing. But when Brady Cook, he looked more healthy. He had a few weeks off in the Music City Bowl, looked healthy. When that happened, well, all of a sudden Marquise Johnson was a big factor again. He's not just the speedy nickname. He can really track the ball. He's a good receiver in my opinion. So to me, there's a couple guys on the outside who have potential to be big-time players in the SEC. They just haven't totally shown it yet. So that will be a big thing to watch for Missouri's offense, without a doubt.
I have to ask, because I was such a big fan of him from his high school film, how good is Missouri at offensive tackle, and can Jack Lange play at all next year? It's a humongous ask. I know what I'm at for a freshman OT at any school, but is there any chance he could play next season for the Tigers?
He might play a little bit. Start, I don't see that happening. Missouri went into the portal for some tackles, some guys who have experience at the Big 12, for instance, that kind of deal. And there's already a guy they took in the portal, Javen Richardson, last year, who was a tackle that didn't really get any action. But I just think I just can't really see a true freshman being a huge factor at that position, especially in pass protection. I just think it takes more time to develop those skills, generally speaking.
Well, Johnny Williams came over from West Virginia, et cetera. They got some guys, but
right.
Lange is, I mean, like when I watched his film for the first time, and then I went back and watched some more, I'm like, barring injury, this kid's probably an NFL player. And, you just don't know how kids are going to transition from just mowing over high school kids in Missouri.
Right.
He didn't play, he's killing kids on every down. But I'm sure that they would like to get him wet a little bit and throw him into the water, because in 26, that's a really, really important thing. You want to start having the homegrown thing, because they did okay in the portal at tackle, but we both know if you don't win O-line recruiting out of high school, it's rough. Here's a little stat for
Totally.
The final four teams in the playoff: Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Texas. One kid was a portal kid on the offensive line.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's just those kids, if you're going to, I don't think you hear about it very much. Like, you hear about the guys who leave in the portal and how much money they get, but you're telling me, like, on that $20 million, Ohio State team, I'm sure some of those offensive linemen got some money that nobody heard about. It wasn't reported, but like, hey, let's keep the big fellas happy because they're incredibly important. And that's why you don't see them leave, is my point, because everybody else knows how important they are too.
The one question about it, to your point, getting ready for the play, they'd had a couple guys banged up. That was the big question about Ohio State. And they had quite a few guys come back, but they had injuries. If one or more of those guys had left in the portal, they don't hang the banner.
Right.
O-line it's not a sexy position, and I get it. But if you're not good up front, it's over. I think 2 years ago for Missouri, They ran the ball down. They ran it on Georgia.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
O-line matters a lot. So
very much.
And we're going to talk about certain offensive linemen in the class of 26. There's one guy in the state of Missouri that is absolutely, unequivocally elite. I had a chance to see him recently. I want to ask John about him because he's from the state of Missouri, and I would be shocked if he's not the top guy on the board for the Tigers. That is next here on The Portal. Super 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is the icing on the cake. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official Super Bowl partner 59. All right. It's time to talk about the guy that I'm sure is going to be mentioned on your show. I'm going to go over under 50 times between now and National Signing Day in December.
That's
Jackson Cantwell out of Nixa, Missouri. I had a chance to meet him at the Under Armour game recently, and several of my buddies in the recruiting industry, John Garcia Jr., Steve Wiltfong, had said, we're all following him around. And it's like, this is ridiculous. He's ready now.
It's insane.
As a like he could compete for a two deep spot. No lie at Mizzou right now at the end of his junior year of high school. He's got another year of high school, unfortunately for the kids in front of him. Good luck to them.
I would not want to line up against him at 18 years old. No, thank you.
I wouldn't want to line up against him, period, John.
No.
That's Jackson. By the way, Jackson is super kid. His dad is awesome. He was an Olympian, blah, blah, blah. He's a Missouri guy.
Right.
Had a chance to meet one of the greatest guys I've met in a long time. So shout out to him. His kid's been raised right. He's one of the best interviews I've ever done. So when I asked him about recruiting at the Under Armour event, it was, a who's list. Like he's been to Bama, he's been to Oregon, Missouri, Nebraska, Georgia, Michigan is in there. Like his list was massive. But the two schools that I kind of got a feeling that he was most interested in to a certain degree, because he's kind of a Midwest guy, maybe three: Michigan, Nebraska, and especially Missouri. What have you heard, and what's the chatter amongst Missouri fans about Jackson Cantwell?
Well, I'll just add too that I've heard Georgia's definitely very much in the mix
I
there
wouldn't be
too.
shocked.
They're a great offensive line school, of course. Why would you not consider Georgia if you're Jackson Cantwell? But gosh, what really stood out to me again, his father Christian, an Olympian, actually the silver medalist in the shot put in 2008, and just a massive human being. So when I saw Jackson standing next to his father at the Missouri basketball game recently, I was stunned because Jackson's like a head taller than his father. Yeah. He's like 6'8" or something. I'm just going, all right. I just spent the previous segment talking about how true freshmen usually can't play on the O-line. To your point, he probably is the exception there. And also, I do happen to have a sports theory that served me well, especially when I used to play a lot of fantasy sports back in the day. I like to call it, I'll just call it like the Eli Manning, Justin Upton theory, which is obviously most great players, their sons don't go on to also be great all-time players. But if you do have that brother or son who also has a big profile, think Arch Manning or Eli Manning or Justin Upton, who was the little brother of BJ Upton back in the day. I just thought of that one too. The point is, when those guys have the really high pedigree, like Jackson Cantwell seems to here, obviously the son of an Olympian, all that good stuff, I tend to think those guys pay off like 95% of the time. They've seen what it takes to be great, and they have it in them. They've already they've obviously got the talent, so then it's just a matter of, hey, I got to learn from my dad how to do the stuff. I think we've seen Patrick Mahomes, benefit from that, just hang around his dad in the dugout, that kind of deal, in the players' locker room, that kind of stuff. So to me, I think hit the pedigree there, not only genetically, but just knowing how to compete at the very highest level, even though it's shot put instead of football. In some ways, I think it's a similar task. You're in the weight room all the time. Shot put's not exactly glamorous. Neither is playing offensive tackle. The point is, I think a lot of those skills and lessons translate.
It's amazing how that works. Dia Bell is one of the top quarterbacks in the class of 26. Raja Bell's his father, NBA. And he goes to the 7-on tournaments and all this stuff, and he knows what it's like. Because he was the poor guy that had to guard Kobe and those players. He was the defensive guy. So those are probably not fun meetings to go into. But his son learned that stuff. And although he's not the same level of computer athlete as dad is, the mentality sticks. And he understands how to include everybody. He understands how to interview, all that stuff. And Jackson, him and Dio are like clones. It's ironic. Their parents were professionals. It helps. As for the recruiting, Mark, I mean, there can't be anybody else in state that's on the same level as him in terms of need, I would assume, right? I mean, and I'm not picking on anybody, but this is a rare player for any state.
100%.
Because of the mentality, the bloodlines, and all of that. It's just
the
crazy.
Measurables, everything. Yep.
Yeah. Who else in state, though, is at least something for them? And is there anybody else just in general? I know that the Missouri fans, like any fan base, they would prefer to get a few homegrown because you can see them playing high school and stuff. Is there anybody else that's on the board in state or out of state you're curious about?
Titan Davis is a kid right off the top of my head another big guy up front that stands out. But again, to your point, Jackson Cantwell truly is just in a tier by himself. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, the distance between him and the rest of the state, it's a gulf. It really is.
Okay, well I have family in Missouri, and I know he's not close to it. I got family close to Columbia. I might have to go see him this year. He's one of 2 or 3 trips I'm going to take, because he could end up being the number 1 player in the country, regardless of the service. I know Rivals right now has him number 1, just off the top of my head. Now, whether or not that sticks, these things change.
Sure.
But again, just for Missouri fans and SEC people in general, he could end up somewhere else. I think he'll end up at Missouri. That's my guess. But you will never find a more perfect scenario. In-state, dad's an Olympian. I think his mom's, she was something else.
I think she played softball or something.
Yeah, she's
like
an
that.
athlete.
Yeah, she's
too.
an athlete in her own right, I think, for sure.
And his dad went to Missouri. Like, everything is just a fit.
Yep.
And then he's a super smart kid. This is always the test for me. I tell this to people that aren't familiar with the SEC. When I shook Jackson's hand, now I don't have the biggest hands in the world, but I couldn't see mine.
Right.
He's not a normal human being.
Right.
This is a 3-and-out player that will be a top 4 to 8 pick in the NFL draft. Pick whichever guy you want from the last 10 years that was an offensive tackle, went in the top 10. He's on that par athletically. If there is ever a kid that Mizzou could not let get out of state, Jackson Cantwell is that guy.
I think they probably won't let him get out of state. The way you're putting it all together there, again, especially with Missouri's NIL game, and really the in-state thing does play very well in Missouri. It does. You look at Luther Burden off the field, did very, very well, not just in terms of, sort of your, I guess I'm calling it traditional. It's been around for like 3 years, but your traditional NIL payments. On top of that, he's got, sponsorships for, potato chips and with Emo's Pizza and all kinds of stuff. 100%. So the point is, all that stuff plays well, and it's just a little bit of sprinkle on top of the cake.
Well, I'm really excited to see how he develops, because I get blessed to go to all these events, and there's every now and then there's a guy like, okay, he's a little different.
Yeah.
He was one of like 3 to 5 guys out of like 100 that was at the Under Armour event, and they all are going to go Power 4.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, I mean, barring this significant injury, that's top 10 pick.
Wow.
So I was very excited about him. And again, the creativity with all the things he has going for him off the field just makes it more. John, where can everybody find out what's going on with you and everything you got going on?
Well, hit me up at Locked On Mizzou everywhere on social media, but of course, YouTube, wherever you get audio podcasts, Locked On Mizzou, 5 days a week, talking Missouri Tigers football and basketball.
I appreciate it, John. We'll have you on again soon. We're going to talk some 26 recruits. Cantwell, quite a few times. I have a feeling between now and signing day, maybe on signing day, you'll be smiling more if they get him. But thank you once again for making the portal your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some recruiting. Everybody have a good one. I will talk to you again soon.